Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Father Talks podcast. I am your host, Mike D, and today we are joined by my very special guest, Dr. Alexandra Stockwell, also known as the Intimacy Doctor. Alexandra, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here. Uh, Tell us about, what, let's jump right into it. Tell us about your background because I have a ton of stuff to talk to you about.
Okay, well, I'm really glad to be here and excited to dive in. As context, I'll say I've been married for over 30 years. I have 4 children. My husband and I have 4 children together. And yes, I essentially transitioned from practicing medicine to really serving couples and families and individuals wanting to have more intimacy in their lives. And when I use the word intimacy, I want to be very clear. Sometimes people hear that and they think it's code for sex. It definitely includes sex, but it's not code for sex. It's also that sense of emotional closeness that comes with good communication, feeling seen, heard, cherished, respected. And it's what we all need more of in our intimate relationship.
And, as we were talking offline, I was telling you that I had just joined this men's group. In that through that conversation, a lot of the guys we were talking about the things that we were excited about, the things that we were proud of, and our challenges. All the guys were proud of their families, but when it came to challenges, it came down to you know developing a better closeness in their relationships. Or some of the guys, they wish they were on their second marriages and they wish that they had knew before what they know now because that may have saved the previous relationship. There's a few guys who, some of the guys are married now, separated from their spouses, and they wholeheartedly want those relationships to work out, but we don't all have the tools, admittedly, to, try to fix whatever is, keeping us separated. So I thought, while I was sitting there, I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to talk to Dr. Stockwell tomorrow. I am going to just be just badger her with questions like this because, we the purpose of this show is to help men be better communicators. It's something that we weren't taught. And even when we do communicate, sometimes we communicate in a way that makes us seem, angry. It makes us seem like we're not listening and we're trying to make a connection, but necessarily we don't always know how to. Now, I know that relationships are a two-way, they require two people, but for all intents and purposes, I can't speak for others. I can only, say what happens with men. And so for this episode today, I need all the help I can get from you to help us men out to be better partners and to, you know, and I know some ladies do listen to the show. Uh, help us help us be like you. I want to be married 30 years. Most guys want to be married 30 years, 50 years, 60 years, so whatever happens.
Okay, well, I just love how you frame that. And before getting into practical solutions,
Okay.
men like practical solutions. And quite honestly, I am all about practical solutions. I think when it comes to challenges with communication and challenges in marriage, understanding is really overrated. It's nice to understand things, but that doesn't change anything. What
Okay.
changes things is practical solutions, creating different results and new outcomes. And the one thing I want to say before really giving lots of practical suggestions is that I am really sympathetic. I'm obviously not a man and never have been. However, I'm really sympathetic to the unique challenge of being a man in this day and age where you know enough to want more connection, to be able to be successful within your marriage. We are past the time where a woman's gonna just stick it out no matter how you show up, and I think this is changing. Some things are a lot worse for the generation coming up, and some things are better, but by and large, as you alluded to, men are from the time they're 5 years old, we have data showing that they are essentially There are always exceptions to this. There are different individuals and different families, but as a society as a whole, men are basically taught that it's okay to feel anger
Mhm,
and nothing else. And so if we think of the 4 main emotions, it's happiness and then anger, being afraid, and being sad. And I mean, we're all happy to have happy children. I mean, happiness is super important, but I'm not gonna focus on that. By and large, women are permitted and encouraged to feel both afraid and sad and not supposed to get angry. And men, it's okay to be angry, like it's inconvenient, but a real man gets angry. A real man doesn't feel afraid and doesn't
mhm.
feel sad. And yet, in order to have healthy relationships, we need access to more of the range of human emotions available to all of us for our relationship with ourselves benefit and our ability to be in the presence of someone else having those emotions also benefits. So I want to focus on the solutions, but I also just want to frame this is a dilemma really beyond our comprehension that impacts both the individual and society in general. And most of the answers readily available are awful. They are destructive and they do less for marriages. Like, it would be better just not to be exposed to a lot of the suggestions that are being given. So
Yeah,
I'm very happy for this conversation to
me too.
really contribute in a very constructive, positive way.
Yeah, and here's the thing is that and like I said, what I learned last night, 1, I'm not the only guy who's going through this. I'm not the only
You know
man
what? Can
who
we just
struggles with
stop
this.
right there?
Yeah, yeah.
Because that is so important. Women tend to talk with one another more and share some of the challenges, and men don't. I have a master class that I teach how to ask your woman for sex so she's more likely to say yes. And the men who take that and then sometimes progress to my program called initiating, all of them end up saying in the feedback form at the end how amazing it is to realize it's not just them.
Yeah,
I think that what you're describing about you're not the only one, you're not alone, until a man has that experience being with a group of men who may be using similar words, maybe using different words, but they're all describing that pain of disconnection, essentially. Those are my words. I don't know that someone else is going to describe it that way, but there's a way in which you don't feel connected and what that's like. It is so important for every man listening to know you are not alone.
right, and that's the thing is that most of us kind of express it in a way that you you're in a room full of people, all the time in your house, but at the same time, you feel like you're on an island by yourself.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate because to to reach our full potential, we need to be able to express certain things that we have all been unable to. I'm 52 years old, and I am finally learning things that I wish I had known 30 years ago. I wish that I could express myself in ways that probably could have saved some relationships, probably could have, you know what, prevented some misunderstandings and that. But growing up, I was always, it was always okay for me to be happy or angry. Those are the only 2 emotions that I've ever really been that was ever really expressed or that was ever allowed or expected, you know? And when I was mad, like, "Oh, here we go again," But most of the time, I was mad because I could not express myself, you know, fully in a
Let me
way to
give
make
a
people.
practical suggestion about that
Okay,
because
yeah.
you articulate the dilemma so beautifully. And your focus in what you said is about being able to express more than happiness and anger. And there's a step before that. The step before that is to be aware of it, is to be
Mhm.
self-aware. In other words, what comes first is realizing what is happening inside you, what your internal experience is, what your emotions are, and the second step is being able to express that well. So, I know from experience with so many couples and so many men, when I ask the question, "How do you feel right now?" In fact, if you're open to it, let me ask you that question.
Okay.
How do you feel right now?
At the moment, I'm excited about this conversation because I feel like the I feel like the potential is there, you know, for me to not have to constantly hide, my emotions. Like if when my son was younger, when my kids are younger, it was okay for me to be excited and happy for accomplishments for them. But now, through these conversations, through the men's group, you know, I can I feel like, I'm on the track where, it is okay for me to even, be sad about things and be able to express that and not be less of a man because I express sadness, you know. Now, I'm not a crier. I never have been, and I know that it's an emotion that, you know, I need at some point I'd like to get a little more in touch with, but for the moment, I would just be able I'm just happy to be able to express a full range of emotions and not feel like everybody is standing behind me judging me because, you know what, I was sad about something. You know what?
That is so beautiful, and I'm glad you gave such a full answer. I'm gonna pull back to just focus on the fact that you said, "I'm excited,"
Yes.
because I wanna honor you for that.
Thank
It's
you.
not about whether you're excited or sad or frustrated or joyful. I'm not commenting on the particular feeling. I'm
Mhm.
commenting on the fact that you immediately said, "I'm excited." Because the fact is, if you're listening, think to yourself for a moment, how do you feel? Because most people, their answer is fine or good. But if your answer is, I feel good, that's not for the purposes of this conversation, that's not a feeling. That's not aware enough. So being able to consider that you're excited or however else you are, that is really the first step. If you're listening and you want to be able to express yourself well and constructively, meaning you feel more connected after you express yourself and the person you're talking to is able to hear you well, the first step really is knowing how you feel. And I actually often give an exercise that I got from one of my teachers, to like set an alarm and 3 times a day, you could do it once a day, but
Mhm.
anyway, with some consistency to just pause and notice how you feel and then write down, I feel however it is you feel, in your case, excited. And that is a right way to feel. Because if you say, I feel angry, and that is a right way to feel. I feel tense, and that is a right way to feel. I feel nervous, and that is a right way to feel. Because if we have positive feelings, and that is a right way to feel is obvious. So
Mhm.
I'm illustrating it more with negative ones because if you know how you feel, and you feel that way, whether or not you're aware of it, that feeling is there. If you can be with that feeling, then you are much more capable of having a calm, useful conversation. But if you don't know how you feel, then it's going to come out sideways and be influencing you, and you'll end up less connected than before you started speaking.
Now, here's another thing. Uh, like I said, we talked quite a bit last night, and I picked up on a few things where, some of the guys were almost in their particular relationships or past relationships when they expressed emotion out of the norm. something like crying or something like being vulnerable, that that emotion wasn't rewarded. It was more punished because now it was something that came up later on in another argument. Oh, well, what you gonna do? Cry, or that type of thing, or what you sad, and when things like that happen, men recoil, and you will never see that emotion again from a man. So
Absolutely, yes.
when you get an opportunity with men, and if he lets his guard down with you, and you take that emotion and step on it, you will never see that emotion again. And we need we need
I
more
wanna give a
place.
suggestion
Okay, yeah, please.
because if you're a man and you have the courage to share some vulnerability, to let your sorrow be seen or whatever emotion it is,
Mhm,
if you have a relationship, essentially, let's say you're married and the culture of your marriage does not include you as a man sharing those things. It's never happened before. Well, yes, it's a big change for you if you start opening up that way, but it's a really big change for her too. And she doesn't know what to do with it. And what you've described is someone who really wasn't prepared, wasn't able to orient, and maybe she's not used to really being vulnerable either. She might be intense, she might cry, but that doesn't mean
yes,
that she's vulnerable. So, my strong suggestion is that you set up the conversation. So it's not that you just start crying and it's confusing and unsettling for her, not because the emotion is, but it's just she's not used to it. She doesn't know how to interact in that moment, and it is
right,
unnerving, and that's when it's gonna come out later in the insulting way you described. So, one thing I really encourage everyone to do, certainly with a spouse, but with other in other situations as well, is to start by saying, I have something vulnerable I want to share with you, or I have something emotional I want to share with you. Are you available to hear it? And if the person you're talking to says no, then you need to accept that. It has to be a sincere question, not just a rhetorical question where the only okay answer is yes. But if she says or he says yes, then you're already on the same page and you're both bought into whatever the conversation is going to be. And then you can say, I just feel so sad that we we are at this point or whatever the sadness is about. And if you keep it really vulnerable and don't go into anything blaming, but you're just sharing your own experience and not saying the other person is causing it, then because they're not, because they're doing things and you're responding, but your response is why the fact that you're responding that way is why you feel that way, not because of what somebody else did. And that just sets things up to be treated with more respect.
okay. So let's talk about couples for a second. Um,
Okay.
so many couples, they start their relationships feeling deeply connected and passionate. And as we know, over time, that that energy kind of disappears. You know, why does passion commonly taper off?
I think there are a few reasons. One is if you think back to the feeling of being in love, being passionate, that includes a lot of curiosity. Where does that scar come from? And what was your favorite vegetable when you were in second grade? And, if you hadn't joined the military, what do you think would have happened in your life? Like, we just have profound fascination about the other person, and that is part of the feeling of being passionate and being in love. And when a relationship continues for a while, one of the benefits to it is feeling familiar, feeling a kind of closeness because you know one another well. But
Hmm.
in most relationships, that comes at the cost of curiosity.
Mm,
And the thing about curiosity is it has us feel seen. It has us feel important. As human beings, we all, even introverts, it needs to be well calibrated, but we all yearn to feel seen and to feel like we matter. So, one of the reasons that passion just tends to disappear is because we've stopped looking at one another with the same interest that we have at the beginning. So
mhm,
I think the first thing to focus on is not like better lubes or more romantic dinners. Nothing wrong with either one. But I think the thing is to focus on the quality of your attention, to focus on being fully present, sharing what is real for you, and really being interested and open to receive what is real for the other person.
right. And I will tell you, and I've mentioned this to multiple guests, that for me, in, a big portion of attraction and intimacy is conversation. You know,
Yes.
being able to sit in the presence of somebody and we could be talking about the dumbest stuff in the world, you know, but we're genuinely engaged just in each other's presence, having this conversation, and again, it could be about absolutely nothing, but we have each other's full attention. That to me is so attractive. And you know, it's part of what, being passionate is, at least for me. I can't speak for everybody, but let me follow up real quick though, before I get off track. Um, how does a couple determine whether or not, passion is truly gone or if it's just simply buried under, work and life stress, kids, finances, things like that?
Well, that's kind of the $1,000,000 question. And my answer is that it's if it was there before, it isn't always there before, let me just say. But if it is there before, then it's buried. And
Hmm.
the important thing is to prioritize it. And what does prioritize it look like? Well, maybe it involves just being more present with full attention on one another in the way that you described. Maybe it means one or both people doing individual therapy because there's childhood wounding that's being reactivated, leading to shutdown. Maybe it means making a point of having fun together again. There's so many couples who, when they get into the grind of raising children and professional responsibilities, they just stop having fun. So, here's another very practical suggestion, solution that I often recommend for a couple to each of them independently make a list of
Hmm.
fun activities that they like to do with one another, and then compare your lists and make a master list, which includes everything that's on both lists and everything which I might not have thought of to put on my list. It's on
Hmm.
my husband's, but I like it. And I recommend just putting this list up of fun activities that you enjoy doing with one another on the refrigerator or on the back of your bedroom door, and doing something once a week, whether you like to go bike riding together, there's certain movies you like to watch, or take a cooking class. Like, it actually doesn't matter what's on that list. It just matters that you really enjoy doing it with one another, because before the passion erodes, fun tends to be less, and meaningful conversation tends to be less, and fully putting your attention on one another tends to be less. There are a lot of other things that get dialed down that need to be dialed back up if there's
Hmm.
any hope of accessing passion again.
Right. Okay. I mean, and that makes a lot of sense. I don't think we take enough time to, what, we get so frustrated and so, irritated with each other that we don't stop to think about, hey, we used to be so good together. What can we do to fix that? And and again, thinking about the conversation that I had with the guys last night, I was thinking about one of the gentlemen. He said that, there are days, since him and his wife split up, they're not divorced. He said that there are days we have really good conversations, and then out of nowhere, you know, we something pops in our head, and we just start arguing, and what was a great conversation turns into a huge argument, and I don't know how to fix it.
Well, you know, having a fantastic relationship is a learnable skill. And the
Okay.
real problem is that most people have never learned those skills. So people go to school, they learn skills for to become a doctor, to be able to do auto body work, like anything somebody's doing, we expect whether it's an apprentice situation or school. I mean, I assume, you know, you could talk at length about the training in the military. Like there
Yeah.
is we expect to be taught skills and then learn them. And the thing is that we don't, in our culture, really have education in the skills needed for a successful, happy marriage. And as mammals, the main way that we learn about relationships is through imitation. So the
Mhm.
main education that we have is whatever we observed and concluded about our parents or other caregivers. And even when parents have a good relationship, most of what goes on to making it good is not in public. It's the relationships that we see more of is when people are fighting. It's very rare to see parents actually calmly work through and resolve something. So we're most of us at a handicap. And in fact, the majority of my work is teaching those skills, which are simple, but require practice to become masterful and make them second nature. One of those skills is like, I think of cultivating curiosity as a skill. I think of before a conversation that is not logistics and not talking about TV, but, where there might be crying or in any case, tender emotions. It's a skill to set that conversation up well. So for me, the question really is less, is the passion gone? Let me just be very clear. Does it feel like it's gone? Totally. Is it
Right.
actually gone? No, because there aren't the skills to learn how to connect well. And when you're talking about this man who is separated and they have amazing conversations and then something suddenly flares up and it's not good. Well, that's because both of them are triggered and it is their responsibility individually to work things through so that whatever it is less triggering. It doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean it doesn't need attention. It does. It definitely does. But if we're operating from a trigger, essentially, I'm saying learn to be responsive rather than reactive. That
Okay.
is a skill that is missing with this couple that you described. And it sounds like both of them go to reactivity instead of responsiveness. Because I'm not suggesting whatever was problematic just be ignored or, you know, pushed under the rug. No, but you can respond with that hurts, or why are you looking at it that way? I see it so differently. Like there's a way to move forward, or why are you bringing that up again? What is your purpose?
Yeah. And
It's
because
not
most
ignoring it. It's
right.
responding instead of reacting.
Okay, and that was gonna be my follow-up because in even because again, the situation, I've heard with a lot of people that, even through that conversation is that people in these long-term marriages, they're rehashing things from 15 years ago. that they thought that, was done and over with, but every time things get tense in the marriage, one or the other, brings up something from the past. And
It's because they were never fully resolved. It seemed
right.
like it because they moved on, but it
Right.
wasn't fully resolved, and it becomes an Achilles heel anytime things are stressful.
Okay. So would you say that was a situation, because again, we don't all have the skills to navigate situations like this. So would this be something that maybe we sit down with a counselor and talk to somebody? I mean, counselor, our, you know, our pastor at our church, somebody who is on the outside who doesn't have a vested interest, because I feel like that's the only way you're going to get, honest answers, honest solutions. You can't go to family because family's always going to, pick somebody's side.
This is tricky. In principle, I would say yes, talk to somebody. In practice, a lot of people are available to help in those situations, but are not actually skillful about it.
Okay.
So, this is true with any kind of trauma, and I'm going to include the scenario you described where something happened 15 years ago as a trauma, that talk therapy or talking about it only goes so far because it can just bring up what was painful and not actually change it.
Okay.
So, uh, but let me give a useful answer. I'm being honest and just
Yeah,
thinking
yeah,
this
no,
through.
we
I
appreciate
think
it.
I think if you're going to talk to somebody,
Mhm.
which can be helpful, and I'm talking about doing this together. Is that what you were picturing also?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. If you're going to talk to somebody, then at a minimum, get really clear on what the purpose of that conversation is. If
Right,
it's just, quote, to talk it through, it may not actually help the relationship. If it's just to get a third opinion, it may not help the relationship because if one person did something, let's use infidelity just because it's very easy to understand how this would be the case. So, and infidelity is not only perpetrated by men, but much more often. So let's just say 15 years ago, a husband had a one night stand with someone. The couple has gotten over it, but then 15 years later, she's bringing it up. If
right.
they go and it could be infidelity, it could be, I don't know, something with finances, it could be that a plate was dropped, like, anything can function in this. I'm just using infidelity as the stand-in for the kinds of things. Or, if I think in my own marriage, like, my husband said something that he never meant to hurt me, and it really hurt me, and it was one of those things that, it still came up, like, 15 years later, it was hard to talk about it without crying. Now it's no big deal, but I this what I'm describing, it can be true with something intense and something seemingly mild to the person who did it. He didn't even understand why it bothered me so much. But anyway, when that happens, if I am hurt, and that's why it comes up again, having a third person say, "Oh, that shouldn't bother you anymore," or,
Mm,
you know, "Husband, you should really apologize." Like, there's very little that can be said if what I actually need is to work it through so that I can be responsive instead of reactive. And it's complicated because if I'm hurt, I want him to fix it because he caused it.
right,
And he wants to fix it because he caused it. But actually, if I'm hurt, I need him to make amends and be clear on the impact of his actions so that it doesn't happen again.
mhm,
And I also have to work it through and find my way to get over it. And so it can be very helpful to talk to a third person, but it's not necessarily if that person isn't skillful in navigating old traumas.
Right. Okay. Well, and that kind of answers my other question because I was going to ask, what is it that women need emotionally, from their husbands, that men commonly misunderstand or don't recognize?
Yeah, I would say, well, 2 things, and we've talked about both, but one is loving, present quality of attention. I think
Hmm.
men have no idea the resource that they have to improve the relationship and make their woman happy through present, loving attention. And you don't even have to do anything, it's in how you listen. It can be about getting stuff done, but more often it's just about how you're present, what your energy feels like. And the other is to really work in whatever ways you need to understand your impact, because there are things that might bother a woman that just seems confusing or no big deal, or you've been sorry for so long, can't she just get over it too? Then if you're feeling that way, you haven't appreciated the impact of what you've done. And we're talking about it, of course, from men's perspective. If I were focusing on the woman's perspective, I'd be saying additional things. I just want to make clear I'm not saying, well, I was going to say, I'm not saying it's all on the man, but I'm going to change that. What I really believe is something, I have a whole chapter on this in my book, is that
Oh yeah, we're gonna
I
get to that.
okay, well, I really think that the key to a great relationship is when each person takes 100% responsibility. So if
There you
you
go.
yeah, because if you think 50-50, you did your part, you apologized, now it's her part to meet you halfway, that's never gonna work. So, I'm just emphasizing that, I mean, it might work occasionally, but not in the long term, and so, yes, in that to understand your impact, to really consider what would it mean to take 100% responsibility for everything that has happened, and I'm just making the point that I'm not saying she has no responsibility, she has 100% responsibility too.
Yeah. I mean, and again, we we talk, so I talk to men regularly about a lot of these things, and that is the other thing that comes up. What do women often do? Or what do men often need from their wives? You know, in order to help them be better communicators. You know, and that's still something. Most men will tell you, yeah, my wife listens, but she don't understand what I'm going through, or I try to tell her, and then it turns in like let's say I'll use an example like if a man if if I'll use me if I told my wife, I something you did, really bothered me, now me being me, it would probably come out like, hey, something you did, really made me mad. Rarely am I going to acknowledge that people hurt my feelings, but then instead of taking ownership of something that you may have done, you know, oftentimes, some women, not all women, will cry or they'll get upset and emotional, you know, about something about how I said it to you, versus taking the ownership of what was done to me. So now I don't want to even come to you about things that you have done or that has upset me in some way because we don't deal with the situation. We just end up, you know, it ends up becoming about you. So I keep that all inside too.
Yeah, that is a tough one because the ideal is that you bring it up and you pay attention to your tone while you do so.
Right. And that is one right there. I tell everybody, if you want a good conversation with me, how you bring it to me will dictate the entire conversation. So if you come to me and
Exactly.
if you come in the house, rampaging, stomping and whatnot, that conversation is not going to go well. It's just never going to go well.
Yeah,
But if you come to me and you just simply say, "Hey, we need to talk. Something you did this, and I need you to hear me." That conversation 100% of the time turns out differently.
I think it's sometimes helpful to think about code switching
Mhm.
because, um, that's the phenomenon where somebody may have a way of communicating or has a way of communicating, and they
Yeah.
learn to communicate another way. I'm sure you know
Right,
that's
sorry.
most often
Yeah, what
used
you
with what?
yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and that term is most often used in talking about how Black people can speak Black talk and speak white talk in order to be successful in both scenarios, and I think
Right.
that that notion applies too when it comes to men and women speaking because, um f like, these are broad generalizations, but most women who succeed professionally need to
Mhm.
code switch and talk man talk and be focused on getting it done and, just, like, being able to communicate like a man with men. That's not true of all work circumstances, but
Right.
many. And I think by and large in our culture, we we women and we in the culture are looking for men to be able to talk like women and pay attention to the tone. And yes, you're focused on the content, but what about how you're saying it to me? And so, what I actually think is ideal is for both people in the couple to develop skills to be able to be gentler in tone and really focus on how connected you feel moment by moment, and also be able to really stick to the point and focus on the action that was done and what action needs to be done instead. And when both people really develop the capacity to be fluent in both of those ways of speaking, then you just need to be clear about which one is appropriate for any
Okay.
particular communication.
Okay. So while we have some time, let's talk about Dr. Stockwell, the author, the best-selling author, excuse me, um, Uncompromising Intimacy. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Okay, well, that's my book. I have a copy in hand, and it's actually a pretty short book.
Okay.
The Audible version is, I think, 3.5 hours, and I recorded it many about well, in 2020, and I have learned a lot since, and it should have been faster, so you can listen to it at a faster speed. It is not a long book. And the whole purpose of the book is to teach the kinds of skills that we've been talking about. It's super practical with story like some general principles and stories about different couples, and then very particular tools and exercises to be able to cultivate curiosity, like we were talking about before, how to pay attention to tone when you communicate, taking responsibility, being able to let go of resentment. All of these things are very, they can be boiled down to very practical exercises to cultivate those skills. I don't think that I talk about paying attention to how you feel in the way we're talking about that earlier, but it's filled with those kinds of practical applications in order to communicate well, create more emotional intimacy, and really pave the way for passion.
Right. And see, and we didn't even talk about sex today. I didn't think the sex part was super important, while in every marriage it is, don't get me wrong, but men and women require different things, you know. And I really feel like for the men listening to the show, especially, I talk to a lot of guys that are always complaining how, hey, man, I'm not getting it enough, not doing this. But again, the conversation always goes back to what are you not doing that you were doing before? You know, and I think conversations like this, learning to be better listeners, learning to communicate better, you know, that will pave the way for everything else.
Yes, and just to drive the point home, we don't have we women and we humans don't have some magic switch that can be off all day long where you're not like if my husband isn't paying attention to me and he's just focused on his stuff and what he needs to get done,
Yeah.
it's nice if he's focused on what the children need, but if he's not focused on me, he's not interested in who I am, he's not curious about me, he doesn't notice when I get my hair cut, like, if he doesn't get who I am during the day, when it's time to go into the bedroom, there isn't some magic switch that I have that I can flip on and be, like, fully present and open my heart, open my legs, and be ready to be interactive. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, there is the saying which applies to many people, not all, where men connect through sex, and then are available for more conversations, and women connect through conversation and then are available for sex.
Exactly. Yeah.
But whether that's true in your marriage or not, you gotta up your game in how you're interacting outside the bedroom. In fact, I just made a video yesterday, which
Okay.
opens with the bedroom remembers breakfast because what you're doing from when you get up in the morning until you go to bed, assuming that you're going to make love in the evening, all of that contributes to what happens in the bedroom. Everything which isn't sex has the potential to function as foreplay.
Mm. You hear that, fellas? You guys you might want to be paying attention to that one. So, Doctor, where can we find the book?
Well, it's available on Amazon and Audible, and if you go to my website, like, all the links are there. My website is alexandrastockwell.com, and you can find everything there.
Okay, outstanding. Doc, hey, listen, I love getting educated. I do. I really love getting educated. We talk about some things that you know, I can honestly admit that I didn't know. I'm really hoping that you know, men and women will take this conversation and take into account each other. For men who want closer relationships to their spouse. Men who want to fix their marriages, who want to stay in their marriage. Especially these guys who've been in these long term relationships and are on the verge of divorce. I want them to be able to get the tools to refocus that relationship. You know,
Right on. It is possible.
yeah, and that is exactly why I thought it was so important, you know, to talk to you and to get your your expertise, and obviously, what you're doing. You've been doing it for a while, so hey, and I am so grateful that to for you to take this time out, out of your day to talk with us.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Alexandria Stockwell. Uh, please, I'll as soon as this episode airs, I will post the link to her book. It'll be on the Facebook page, and I'll put it on YouTube. Just what, listen, if you're really serious about saving your relationship, getting closer to your significant other, you know what, every piece of advice can help. So, Dr. Stockwell, thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody, hey, that's it for us today. Thanks. Have a great day.